Donald Trump has endorsed Jody Hice to challenge Raffensperger for Secretary of State. Hice has embraced Trump's Stop the Steal campaign and maintains that Joe Biden didn't win the 2020 election. Trump then not only endorsed, but encouraged and helped raise millions for Georgia Senator David Perdue to challenge Brian Kemp for governor. Ahead of this week's primaries, Trump will hold a tele-rally in support of Perdue, while his former vice president, Mike Pence, headlines an in-person event for Brian Kemp. Interesting. Joining me now, Nsé Ufot, the CEO of the New Georgia Project, and Molly Jong-Fast, a contributing writer for The Atlantic. I'm fascinated by what's developing between the president and a former vice president. But thank you both for joining. Molly, I'll start with you. Polls show David Perdue lagging Brian Kemp despite that Trump endorsement. Brad Raffensperger is neck and neck with Jody Hice despite Trump's constant attacks. What do you think the value of Donald Trump's endorsement is in a place like Georgia?
What's interesting, because Trump has always been the kind of kingmaker of the Republican Party, or at least people have said that. But you can't be a kingmaker if you're not making kings, right? And it's pretty interesting to see his sort of power waning. You've seen him unable to kind of pick the winners in a bunch of other primaries, too. I think that's good news. The problem is the stakes are so high. And these candidates, these Secretary of State candidates, I mean, Hice already said, that he's going to change the election so that it works for Trump. And basically, he had this sort of, this election integrity. What Trump is actually saying is the opposite. He wants someone who's going to make sure that the election goes to him. So this is pretty scary, and the stakes are extremely high here.
Nsé, you look like you're on a moving vehicle. I'm sure you are out and about in the state of Georgia. In Georgia, down there was the first state to pass voting restrictions in the aftermath of the 2020 election. I mean, how has that new law affected your efforts to organize in the state of Georgia? What does voter enthusiasm look like right now?
So voter enthusiasm is such an unreliable metric, but if we are going to point at it, it's really high right now. I think but for a couple of reasons. On the GOP side, we're talking about a pretty charged primary. We have the disgraced former president of the United States putting his thumb on the scale and reminding people about his role in January 6th and the big lie. Right? You have Georgians, particularly black, brown, and gold Georgians, who are weighing in, who are clear about, one, the power of their vote, and two, the GOP's attempt to mute or neutralize the impact of their vote. And so I think that Georgians are turning out in historic numbers because of SB 202, or in spite of SB 202, that there's a clarity that people are trying to steal their vote, and they're saying not on our watch.
And it's interesting to think about this particular primary coming up and general election versus what happened in 2020, because Molly, when two Trump-endorsed candidates, David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, lost their runoff elections back in that runoff special election after the 2020 general, it was blamed on low voter turnout and not necessarily an indictment on Donald Trump. But this time around, feels a little bit different. There was record early voting in Georgia, 212% increased turnout compared to 2020. What do you think it says if the Trump candidates lose in spite of that? I mean, what message could it send to the rest of the Republican Party here if these things come to be after tomorrow?
Yeah, it's a very good message. It says that Trump, you don't have to be scared of Trump, and you can do the right thing. I mean, look, this is a complicated primary, but if Raffensperger did the right thing, that's why Trump has attacked him, is because he did the right thing. He didn't change the vote. He didn't find Trump the votes he wanted. He did what he was supposed to do as Secretary of State, which was honor his people's votes and count the votes. So I think it'll be interesting to see if he's able to hold on. That's probably a good sign for democracy, right? Because it's saying that these people are still kind of, that things are working out. I mean, we'll see. It's still early. I mean, I think the Perdue, Trump tried to make Perdue happen and he couldn't, which is a real sign that Trump does not have the kind of power he used to.
I don't. Can I just say one
Mensa,
thing?
you can jump in. Go ahead. Go ahead.
To Molly, I don't know if Trump's coattails are as long in Georgia as people think they are, number one. Number two, Brad Raffensperger, no defender of democracy. He failed to participate in a criminal conspiracy one time, but he has been 100% aligned with the GOP and their anti-voting agenda before and since then. I think it tells us that the evangelicals and the pro-business Republicans in Georgia have a Georgia agenda. And again, Trump's coattails are not as long as they are.
One of the last questions I have for you, Molly, and I think that that's an important point about some of the unique things about Georgia. But one of the other things that I think is coming up is that demographics aren't destiny. You hear Stacey Abrams say that all the time. And I think it applies to a state like Georgia. You know, the demographics are shifting, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that Democrats are going to come out on top because communities of color are the numbers that are growing. I mean, how do you think the Democrats should look at the results of this race and apply the lessons to the upcoming midterms and other places with similar metrics in play?
Well, the people who have been registering voters, like my panelist, have done an incredible job. I mean, there have been, between Stacey and all the groups on the ground, they've done an incredible job. They've registered tons of voters, and they've managed to, make it matter. So I think that the Democratic Party owes a huge debt of gratitude to that kind of on-the-ground work, and if they win in Georgia, it will be because of that.
And I want to play some sound. Republicans are attacking Stacey Abrams right now because of this comment she made recently at an event where she said that Georgia was, quote, the worst state to live in. Let's take a listen.
I am tired of hearing about being the best state in the country to do business when we are the worst state in the country to live. When you're number 48 for mental health, when you're number 1 for maternal mortality, when you have an incarceration rate that's on the rise and wages that are on the decline, then you're not the number 1 place to live in the United States. But we can get there, Gwinnett.
Where's the lie?
When you find it, somebody tell me. What I heard was a leader that is accountable to Georgians, that knows what's on the top of Georgians' minds. The minimum wage in Georgia is $5.15 an hour. And we're talking about gas that's $6, $7 a gallon. The squeeze that regular, everyday Georgians, working people, are experiencing is acute, and it is present, and it is at the front of mind. And we need Georgians and leaders in Georgia who are going to address that and address it directly. And so, again, if Republicans are attacking Leader Abrams for telling the truth about what's on the heart and minds of Georgia and Georgia voters, it doesn't bode well for their chances in November. And again, I don't think that Georgians are exceptional, but Georgia absolutely could be the exception to what we're seeing in November for the midterm.
When you're citing like Georgia's place on the list, I don't understand why you're mad. I'd be mad about that fact that you're 48 on the list, not that you said you were 48 on the list. That's just me. Molly, the last question before I'll go. I mentioned in the intro that Mike Pence is campaigning for Brian Kemp, while obviously Donald Trump has endorsed and is doing the tele-rally for Purdue. How do you track this unfolding drama between the president, the former president, and former vice president? And in what ways do you think this particular race can tell us, something about what may happen in the rest of the elections coming up? I feel like Georgia is very much a microcosm of the rest of the country.
Well, it's wild stuff, right? You have Pence going against Trump, and for the first time today, he said if he's going to be called, he will go, right? Whatever that means. I think it shows that Trump is diminished, right? Because Pence wouldn't have done this before. I still don't quite understand Pence and why these people on January 6th were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." And now Mike Pence has decided that the Republican Party is great and that he should be a part of it. So I think that it's going to play out. The two of them. It's just we'll see. But I am, anything that kind of gets division in the party can be good for Democrats.
It's definitely drama. I'll say that. Nsé Ufot and Molly Jong-Fast, thank you so much for being here, for starting us off. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.